So, so here's the, well, I'm not ready to record yet until I lay the basis.
That's okay. I can crop it out.
Okay, so,
I just don't want to forget.
so basically, here's the kind of coordinates of the whole thing. So I've known you longer than any person that is presently alive.
I know the feeling.
So, and everybody has dropped dead, but you're still around.
Yeah, you
So,
too.
so we're in the dead man's club where, you know, the first one dies wins because then you're free of the bullshit. We're neck to neck, you, me, and Steve Hills. So now the thing at that point in time that is kind of out of the ordinary is I was, as you know, 100% feral. And there were two other characters involved, David and Lockwood.
Right.
And so that's what I'm kind of, you know, your memories of that and what have you.
Okay, well, you know, in those days, obviously, you and I had limited contact until the days of the Borderland Labs in Santa Barbara.
Well, no, here's the thing, okay?
Yeah.
So you came out there. I mean, I have like just like a little sliver of a memory of that, but
I lit up a 300-watt light bulb right next to the thing, just in our hands. While we were cleaning up at the end, and I mean that put an indelible.
So what it is because of you, when the situation fell apart at the Integratron, it ended up in your neighborhood with Michael Knotts and Chris Carson.
Right, in Santa Barbara, right.
Yeah. And so basically you were there while all that stuff happened. So
I was in Santa Barbara, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the highlights of that, and that's before anything I think even got moved. Well, no, yeah, it got moved to Santa Barbara, but when I got there, you know, I mean, I didn't have a car. David was bringing me in his car. We had to deal with Zoraida, the metal woman. I mean, you remember all that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we were treated like cockroaches by her. And, you know, and we had to live outside and the whole thing. But nevertheless, that's when the reluctance machine entered into the equation.
Well, yeah, I mean, Michael and I had been working on that since I had early contact with John Eklund. And, you know, so by the time you got to the lab, we had built 2 or 3 iterations of that machine. And so, but we, you know, we were really green when it came to electrical engineering at the time. And you were the first person to really put those machines through, you know, rigorous real testing to find out what they were really doing. We didn't know how to do that yet. You know, I was working from, you know, intuitive senses of how these things work. And Michael was, you know, a master prototype machinist. So we could actually build them, but you were the first person who knew enough to actually test them. So
yeah, the Navy showed up. The Navy showed up.
Hey, so do you want to just start it off? Because you'll probably repeat a lot of this stuff, and if that's kind of the era that you want to, you know, straight go to.
There's 3 things. First of all, you know, Peter knows, you know, what kind of creature I was back then. And of course, David and Lockwood were, you know, characters of their own. So, and then, you know, the Integratron, of course, is a very important thing in my mind. I don't know how far we could go into that without, you know, eventually becoming off course of where we're trying to go. But the reluctance machine is a key figure. I don't know the history that led up to it, so that would be important. The other thing is that's where the cosmic induction generator was perfected, and I don't know if Peter was there for all the episodes or not, but
oh yeah, and I mean it's I mean the one film that never, you know, got any release at all was that meeting where you demonstrated the first flame speaker, but everybody from Santa Barbara was there at that demonstration. It was a phenomenon in itself. It's really too bad that we don't have the films of that.
So yeah, the things that we did with the cosmic induction generator in Santa Barbara were beyond extraordinary. So at any rate, that's why I kind of instigated this get together, was to bring back all of this primordial stuff that led up to interacting with Chris Carson and whatever you have to say, Peter, about Chris Carson's work. Chris Carson is a central figure here.
Absolutely. Chris is a brilliant model maker. And I mean, there are some things that Chris and I did that absolutely taught us a tremendous amount about the nature of life force, radiant energy, whatever. And I can relate that on this film too, because most people have no idea.
Yeah, that's important, because I don't know the background, because you guys were working together long before I showed up.
Yeah.
And then,
he was building all those high voltage electrostatic devices, including motors and that variable capacitance machine.
Yeah, Chris was his own. There's
fantastic.
Nobody like him.
Yeah.
Nobody like him. Yeah, and then, I kind of want to get into, the quirkiness of David, and Lockwood, the characters and what have you. So I think actually, essentially, you'll probably be doing most of the talking, because it's your experiences that I'm trying to get out, into the public view, because you have all this background.
Yeah, but mine is spotty, and like I said, it's spotty in relationship to a lot of the people you knew. I only spent time with David when he came with you to the lab and things like that. So my experiences of these people, from a personal point of view, is very limited.
Well, you knew Lockwood pretty good, though, because he was living in the house and was the how would you say, the housekeeper.
Oh yeah, well, that was out at the Integratron.
No, in Santa Barbara, remember?
Well, no, that was Michael Knox. Michael.
No, but remember, Lockwood was there, and we were getting that money from Mexico. Remember?
We were getting the money from Mexico. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, Lockwood was the housekeeper. He was there all the time.
Wow, that's not something I remember.
Yeah, because remember, Zoraida, the metal woman, wigged out, and then Michael Knotts, and so we ended up with the house.
Oh, see, I didn't know that developed that way.
Oh, really? And you were the guy that was paying the bills.
Well, yeah, I was the go-between between Tom was getting the money, and and he was taking an administrative fee, and then he was handing me the rest, and I was basically paying the rent and giving the rest to you. You got every dollar that wasn't that didn't go into rent and utilities.
Yeah. So you were the facilitator.
Yeah, I was just the go-between. I never.
Well, but nevertheless, you were there. You were.
Yeah, I was there. Absolutely.
You were there with us. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm after here.
Okay. I was definitely there.
Okay, and then I guess from what Aaron has heard, he can provide the introduction, and then I don't know how he can do video stuff. Yeah.
And then I just got a couple bullet points here. So Lockwood, David, I guess that's David Franklin, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Chris Carson, reluctance machine, cosmic induction generator, Integratron, Santa Barbara in general. And I think one thing, is just going to trigger the next, it'll just kind of unfold. And then
once we get going, I've seen this when Peter and I, have been interviewed in the past. Once we get going, it flows pretty good.
Yeah, it's it can go on forever too, because
so
you have to tell us when you run out of time or.
Yeah. So what I talked to Eric about is, we can do a handful, maybe a series of these videos.
Yeah.
And then a final one, if you're up to it, is to do so these can be released, one right after another on YouTube and stuff like that, so people can kind of hear the stories and everything. And then, you know, and if there's anything related to any presentations, of course, it'll, you know, can make mention of that and whatever. And then maybe a final video to kind of wrap it up. Could be a Zoom live call where people call in and then, you know, ask questions and stuff, because by that time they should have already seen, you know, the first things of the series. So,
Well, you know,
something like that.
In that 4-quadrant theory of electricity, there's an extensive Integratron section in that. Loads of images and, you know, and what have you. I don't know if you could readily access that or not. Access that.
Yeah, I can mute myself out and then bring up the PowerPoint or whatever, and I can at least just flip through.
Yeah, and then you know, then there's that YouTube video, you know, Chris Carson on stage.
Okay, so that's the SBARC meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, SBARC YouTube vid. Yeah, that's that ball bearing motor and that other stuff that was going on in that video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, those Borderland videos, there's a lot of stuff in there too.
Yeah, the one called Free Energy Research, that first one we did.
That's not the reluctance generator. Yeah.
That had that, but it also had your demonstrations of the difference between inductive discharges and capacitive discharges and stuff.
Then there was we did the longitudinal wave one, and I think Chris Carson is in one of those also.
Yeah.
So I can reference those on your website, Eric, because there's a videos section with free videos. And I know that the longitudinal transverse ones are on there, possibly the free energy research one.
Those are all part of the classic energy vids.
Okay.
They're all in there.
Classic energy videos.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me just start off with some kind of introduction and whatever, kind of state the purpose of it, and then just go from there.
Yeah, let's hit the start button.
Okay. Let's see.
B and me.
Okay. Well, I wish I had a better background, but
Life is a mess, Aaron.
yeah. So
don't try and hide it. No one really.
Okay. All right. Well, this is Aaron Murakami here in Spokane, Washington, at my shop, and I have Eric Dollard at his shop in Tonopah, Nevada, and we have Peter Lindeman at his home out in Liberty Lake here, not too far from Spokane. Today is June 28th. This is Friday afternoon. We're going to be having a series of discussions where Eric and Peter are basically reminiscing about the old days, which predates even Borderlands, I believe. This goes back to Santa Barbara. There's going to be a cast of characters, including people like Lockwood, who I don't really know much about. I've heard a lot about David Franklin. Many of you watching this will know of Chris Carson and some of his electrostatic rotary type experiments. We'll go into, there'll be topics like the reluctance machine, the cosmic induction generator. There'll be some discussion about the Integratron. There's a good section in Eric's 4-quadrant theory of 4-quadrant representation of electricity presentation, which has quite a bit about the Integratron. A lot of this takes place, I guess, in Santa Barbara, and we can we'll be going over a little bit about some of the old Borderland videos, like the free energy research and some of the longitudinal transverse wave videos. Some of these are on Eric's website, but there's also a classic energy videos package, which has a whole bunch of these in one compilation. And so I think for the most part, I'll be muting myself out, and this will be a discussion between Eric and Peter. And I'm pretty sure one thing's going to trigger another. It'll just go from there. So we'll do a series, handful series of videos. These might go, 1 hour, 90 minutes, whatever time that they have to go into this. And after a series of videos, we may wrap it up with a final video or interview session. We will invite the public to call in to take part of that and listen to that, and then we can open up for questions. And this is really for, posterity's sake, to kind of preserve a lot of these stories and the history of this, because unfortunately over time, so many people have passed that have been involved with a lot of these type of, technologies and alternative sciences. And Peter Lindemann and Eric Dollard are some of the last ones standing who are considered some of the, originators and pioneers of this modern day movement, which is still going on from a lot of the stuff that they pioneered starting in the early 80s. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause it and you guys can take it from there. Or I'll mute you.
I guess I'll start with the Integratron because that's where I first met Peter. So the Integratron is really its own story, but through a very strange set of coincidences, I ended up through a person named Don Lockwood, who had custody of the Integratron at the time, had basically set up there and began the process of quantifying what this thing was. Was it just complete space loony, or was there anything significant about it? But as a result of that event, my life was completely changed. Not necessarily because I'd contacted the aliens or anything, but moving to Southern California away from a dying situation in San Francisco, where RCA was in the process of being destroyed by Commonweal, and the maritime industry was being destroyed by Dianne Feinstein. There wasn't much opportunity left in San Francisco. So Southern California created a new life for me. It turned out that LA was actually an amazing place back then, as far as materials, resources, interested people and what have you, particularly through their local Psychotronics Association.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I can safely say, without bragging, that I'm the only person left alive that actually knows what the Integratron is and how to make it work. What is pandered as the Integratron now has nothing to do with it. In fact, actually, it has made it impossible and beyond to ever make any progress with that. Everything that I had done there and Van Tassel had done there had been destroyed. So, and they were instrumental also in my other Landers facility. So I think I'm the only one that left that really knows what the Integratron is and the workings of it and all that. And it's a lot of space loony, what have you, but something was engineered there, and it was not a hoax. There was engineering behind it. Somebody knew what they wanted. I had figured out the first steps and had proceeded to construct that material, and then basically the place was taken away from me and Don Lockwood, and it's ended up as today is what I call a self-worship temple, which basically is just an extension of the Commonweal that I had run from in Bolinas in San Francisco. There is no escaping it. It follows you wherever you go. So that's my take on the Integratron. And then Peter had shown up, and then that's when I was introduced to what was going on in Santa Barbara in progress. So probably Peter should describe his entry into that and the history and what led up to our final cooperative attempts on certain critical machines.
Yeah, well, I was living out in Hawaii when I developed an idea for a low drag generator based on some of the original ideas of John Eklund. And I sent some of the drawings to a friend of mine who eventually put them in the hands of Bruce DePalma in Santa Barbara. And he added them to a presentation that he did in Toronto in 1981. And an engineer in Sacramento actually built the first one. And long story short, it had novel behaviors, apparently almost inverse behaviors of a standard generator. It would load when it would load mechanically when it didn't have an electrical load, and when you put an electrical load on it, its mechanical loading released and got easier to turn. So these inverse properties we decided needed to be studied more, and eventually DePalma invited me to move to Santa Barbara, and he got possession of that early machine, and so that's how I got to Santa Barbara in 1982, and eventually got involved in trying to figure out how to make a living, and I started making all these little gizmos that keyed the nervous system and reduced stress. I called them the biopacers, and sent one off to Borderlands. I had been introduced to Borderlands back in the 70s when Riley Crabb was the director. And so I sent off a unit to him, and the new director took that unit and gave it to Bob Beck in Los Angeles. And Beck really liked them, and he got in touch with me and started buying a lot of them, and started talking about how they worked in some of his lectures and things like that. So I was starting to make a living in kind of mini electronics at the time, and so that allowed me to keep working on some of these more exotic energy machines. So in 1985, I was invited to go to the Integratron to film the magnifying transmitter that you had there. And that's when we first met, and that experience absolutely changed my life. The machine. I'd never seen equipment like this before in my life, and only heard rumors of it, in the works of Tesla and things like that. So yeah, that's how you and I met, and that machine was putting out a spark that was about this tall. I put it on the front cover of my book, Free Energy Secrets of Cold Electricity. I'll just swing that by here. This is a 50% view of the top of that third coil in that machine from the Integratron. So it was actually twice that size, and the machine was also pumping 4 amps radio frequency amps into the ground. So if this spark was the equivalent of about 500,000 volts, and it was pumping 4 amps into the ground, it was the equivalent of 2 megawatts or something, in the immediate vicinity. And it was capable of things I had never imagined electricity could do. And so that really created a very, very firm impression on me that, looking into these types of technologies, there really was something to find, there was something to discover, and there was something to harness for the benefit of humanity. And so, yeah, meeting you and seeing what you had already accomplished at that time absolutely altered the course of my life. And it really focused our attention in Santa Barbara to work on these machines. So I was always picking simpler things to do because my abilities were less informed, but I knew that nature operated on simple methods, and so I was always looking for the kind of the easiest rather than the most complicated or high-tech ways of doing things. And yeah, so things were we were both operating on a zero budget lifestyle. You were negative zero and I was positive zero, but it was at the end of the week it was still zero. So we hopefully someone's going to pick that up. Yeah. So yeah, I mean we were as much as we were interested in these things, we were it could only be part-time because there was always this constant figure out how to get enough money for your next meal almost. I mean, I can remember probably 10 different times in the early years that I knew Bruce DePalma, we took each other to lunch with our last money, literally the last money in our wallet. And we did this back and forth, periodically. It's just what we were doing. People wonder why we didn't, professional engineers wondered why we didn't make more progress. And we were looking at everything that we accomplished as a miracle because the whole world seemed to be trying to slow us down. And we were moving forward on intuition and enthusiasm and dedication. Those were the things that drove us forward. And yeah, so that's that's pretty much where we still are. With maybe a few more dollars in our pocket, and that's about it. But
So what led to the finalized reluctance machine that I analyzed?
Well, that was probably about the third iteration. We had started with a device that I had referred to and filed early patent documents on, which I called the mechanical rotary transformer, which basically had four transformer cores in it, and then a rotor system that would attach, two this way, and as it rotated, then it would attach two this way, and so on. So you could set two of them up as permanent magnets or as DC inputs, and then the opposite ones, as the rotors turned, they would be magnetized in opposite directions as twice as the rotor turned. And what we saw with that was that there was a lot of cogging effects, and there was a lot of harmonics and that kind of thing. And what we finally did was we built a rotor that had just two bars across the rotor, and then we put a third coil around the central section, and then we powered up all of the output ones. So it actually acted like a mechanical transformer, where the middle coil was responding to the magnetization switching in the rotor piece, while the stator pieces stayed as a constant. And that's the machine that you tested. So that was a development off of the first one. But again, none of these things were finished ideas. These were points along an exploration, and that was limited by available money and time.
But that particular machine was very well developed. I would say that was a finality, and that's when I guess it was you wanted me to come in with all my Navy switchboard instruments and then do a hardcore quantitative analysis of what exactly is going on.
Right, yeah, because we had gotten to the limit, but we had built this thing and we had gotten to the limit of understanding how to measure it. We had been approached by somebody who said they could test it, and they did just an absolute hack job on it. And said it was about 30% efficient or 20% efficient or something silly like that. And so that when we had the opportunity to have you test it, we thought that was what we wanted to have happen, and that's and your conclusions were much different than that, of course. So
obviously, the person that did the testing wasn't taking into account the the kind of incipient losses and other things, and not focusing on the actual generating part of the process. So what was particularly difficult and took a lot of instrumentation, and I'll point out for things like this, digital instrumentation is useless. So we were using real watt meters and all that kind of stuff. But mostly Navy switchboard instruments that I gathered from the maritime business. And the first thing that struck me is a machine with that much magnetic leakage operating at that high of efficiency. I mean, it virtually was 100% efficient as far as its mechanical to electrical reproduction process. The losses in the DC field windings or any stuff like that, that's not the part of the generating process.
right.
And the thing that particularly interested me was my Steinmetz research, which I had done previously, had told me that any kind of synchronous parameter variation in alternating current can produce some really bizarre energy anomalies. And it had, within the error of what I estimated in the measurement equipment and what have you. Now, the philosophy behind, what are we going to add and what are we going to subtract, that's still debatable, because there's really no way to get your hands inside what's going on.
Right.
So it took a lot of thought to figure out how to make sure that, our philosophy was correct and not misleading us. But because this thing was a synchronous parameter device, it particularly caught my interest.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think at that time, no, this was before that I'd done my work at the Richmond shipyard. So it was still kind of new to me, but I had a lot of ideas, and that machine looked to me like it was moving in the direction that Steinmetz was going. So I was keenly interested in it. Mm-hmm. And it measured over 100% efficient.
Yeah. I think at the time you were saying around 120.
No, it was about 105 or.
Yeah. It was over 100 though. Yeah.
So at any rate, worst case, the thing had to be operating at 90% efficiency, which is unheard for something that has that many harmonics and that much magnetic leakage.
Yeah, okay, and just let's describe the leakage that we're talking about here. The outer coil was around a rotor section that had, just 2 iron sections in it, and the rest was material that was non-iron, and these were spinning around inside the coil and being magnetized in opposite directions every 90 degrees, and so the amount of air in the coil at all times was more than there was iron, and the distance the iron was away from the coil itself was over 1/4 of an inch, and these are the leakage. If we're talking about when he says there's a lot of leakage, there's just like there's almost
all leakage.
It's all leakage, right? So just so that the people listening to this know what you mean when you say there was a lot of leakage.
Well, fortunately, even though it's all garbled, there's surviving video of all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's surviving video of the tests of that, and the films of that machine are in that free energy research film. We test that machine there.
So that was about the time then that I moved to Santa Barbara. So what happened is the negative forces were in the process of capturing the Integratron. And so I pulled the ripcord and bailed, as soon as I could smell the smoke, so to speak, metaphorically. Lockwood was unfortunately getting sucked into it. He just couldn't, he couldn't help the forces that were being directed at him. He was too naive, and that resulted in our loss of the Integratron. So you guys had decided that the best thing to do was to move the laboratory that I'd started there to Santa Barbara, because David and Lockwood and I had already advanced to the full cosmic induction generator.
Right.
The thing that you took the photograph was that was in the floor of the office, which I'd made into the Tesla laboratory. And it was very primitive, and it had the unfortunate circumstance it was also transmitting. So, that's a problem with the FCC and all that. It wasn't balanced. So all of that stuff needed to be, and the inventory that I built up had to be put somewhere safe. So I forgot, I think it was Michael Knotts was the one that had first managed to come up with somebody that was supposed to facilitate moving the stuff. And I forget, we originally started this off like in some little shack or something in the flat part of town, and then it moved to the house up on the mesa. And that's where we moved the stuff.
Right.
David and I were involved when it was still kind of that other more downtown place, which I forget exactly what it was. So as the story of my life goes, just like my encounter with starting this operation here, which is nothing but an endless concatenation of negative experiences. That's the life of Eric Dahl. Anyone else would have gone mad or been dead by now, but I'm still kicking for some reason. Is the person that was involved with the move was interested in the project. I'll leave his name out to protect the guilty, but he had a process where he was introducing musical chords into the intake manifold of engines with a horn speaker driver, and was getting some rather remarkable engine performance enhancement out of it. And so he was interested in me in that regard, but what he attempted to do was hijack all the equipment and then dispose of Eric Dollar. I mean, that is a cookie cutter formula in my life. It's endless. It will never stop, and it will last for perpetuity until I'm dead. But at any rate, so somehow we managed to circumvent that. It was a very stressful situation. I don't know exactly how we did it. It was almost to the point guns drawn out at the Integratron to get this stuff out of there. And then there was Van Tassel's second wife, which the Van Tassel family insist murdered George Van Tassel. And she was always shooting at us and, and what have you. And that made life, I was kind of used to that because I was strictly feral back then. In my native environment, you would encounter me, running barefoot through the woods. And then once in a while, I would pop out onto the pavement covered with berry stains and stickers in my clothes. What happened? Something dumb. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we saved that and finalized that cosmic induction generator, and that's where a lot of those light bulb photographs came from.
Yeah.
And you were lucky enough to experience that this is the Integratron knot.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, most people don't know there isn't a single nail in that building. That is
not until these people showed up.
Is 100% wood.
It's totally dielectric.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Totally dielectric. So basically, then it was once we had that cosmic induction generator thing going, and we were putting the light bulbs in there. There was stuff that was, as you know, and the flame speaker thing was like nothing that even what Aaron and I have done recently was nothing compared to that setup.
Yeah, what you had in Santa Barbara, when you fired it up, it was like, what, 140 decibels, and you only ran it for like 10 minutes because everybody in the neighborhood was wondering where the hell, Bach was coming from.
Yeah, well, what we did is we had a keyboard hooked to it.
Yeah.
And when you played the keyboard, I mean, it was loud. It was, I would say it was probably 90 to 100 decibels, and you could hear it 2 or 3 blocks away.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely stunning. And then the stuff that appeared in the light bulbs. Now here's one thing that was interesting, and this story's filled with all kinds of this stuff. And I could go on for hours of what led up to the Integratron, of all these weird synchronicities, and and the fact that Philo Farnsworth knew George Van Tassel's son-in-law. I mean, it was, and its relationship to the maritime industry. I mean, this thing is the basis for, some kind of science fiction, fantasy movie. But at any rate, the person that I had mentioned that was facilitating the move of the equipment, he had come by when we had the cosmic induction generator fired up. Now, in all the years, this thing started off in David's bedroom with equipment that we got from RCA long before any of this stuff in Bolinas. And, so this was like the higher power version and all that. And so I don't know how the timelines, it's kind of weird with the Integratron and RCA. There seems to be some kind of like time warps or, I can't make the years add up. But at any rate, I don't know why this guy was there after he was, attempting to abduct the equipment, but he was there. And all the time when David and I started this in 1978 to, Lockwood taking his shirt off in front of the one there at the dome, to pick up the cosmic rays. And the worst that ever happened when one of the light bulbs blew up, he got stuck in a couple of places. But when this guy showed up, okay, and he was put in the guest of honor's chair to witness this whole thing, something got formed in that bulb and just leapt out, and the bulb exploded right at him, and we never saw him again. Didn't like him. Because whatever's going on in that bulb acts alive. And what these are the ones that were.
Yeah.
Some of these I think are Santa Barbara and some are the Integratron.
Yeah.
But the one on the left, that's Santa Barbara. For a fact, that's Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see there's this kind of weird neutral zone where blue turns to red.
Yeah.
And you can keep working this and working this. Now, the only time there was ever a full galaxy was when David and I started this in the beginning, and we don't have any. We took extensive photographic records of all, RCA, the DC power system in San Francisco, all of our experiments. But when you're living in the bushes, the photographs don't last long, and that was all lost. So there's a lot of things I can't show. But that's the only time we really got a full galaxy. But one thing that was very striking that in this Integratron Santa Barbara interval is one of the bulbs blew up, and the problem is when this thing really gets going and you're starting to get the cosmic formations, the bulb's going to explode. And so it makes it, you're always tense, and and you have to work the bulb with a stick and get it in and out and what have you, and try not to get it to blow up. But the thing is, when it takes off, it's going to blow up. One of these episodes, the bulb exploded, and the entity within the bulb maintained itself in space without an envelope for about maybe 3 or 4 seconds. And that is beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely beyond belief.
I'd just like to add, for the listeners here, all those photographs were taken with chemical photography. None of this was digital. The digital stuff that back in those days would get completely eaten alive by the signal from these things and couldn't produce images that clear. So that was all chemical photography to get those images.
Yeah, I remember somebody had brought a photographic, it might have been you, or, in that genre, and tried to set up a camera to film this stuff. And then when I hit the on switch, all the film in the camera jettisoned itself into space.
It was like 95% interference and the rest was image. Yeah, so that's so all the movies that I was hoping to film at the Integratron were just hash. So yeah, but it was amazing though.
Yeah, there it is. That's the
There it is. Now that machine was the grandfather of them all. That was the scary one.
So, do you want to get a little more into Chris Carson, or?
Yeah, but I mean the era of this machine in the there's me when I was looking younger. So yeah, I mean this is about 1986, 1987 in Santa Barbara. This machine. So yeah. So this is the period where we're doing all the switch reluctance stuff, and this is you were doing this. We were going down to the surplus places in Pasadena and spending whole days loading up vehicles with parts and stuff.
Well, I had built up one hell of a parts inventory,
Yeah.
which I wish I had today. So another thing, which is, periodic and basically endemic in my life, is once this was all set up, all of a sudden there was no more money.
Right.
So David and I decided, let's go back to work at the shipyard.
Yeah, that was the period that we were getting the money from the industrialist in Mexico. And and we actually went down to Mexico and tried to help him save some money on his utility bills. He had a huge number of different factories and things. And right then, his son died or something. So we got down there and he couldn't spend any time with us because there was a big family funeral going on and it was just a disaster. Couldn't have been.
We did, get his transformer connections and what have you optimized and all that. And
we shut down the power in his factory and balanced the 3-phase power going into the factory. No one wanted to do it. You were telling him how to unconnect everything, but then no one wanted to go and actually change the taps on the transformer, so I did it. It was funny. I asked Eric, this thing's off, right? And he says, yes.
Well, they had one crazy guy come in. He was the kind of, I don't know, he was kind of like a Steinmetz-y looking character. And he couldn't wait to get in there with that hot stick and pull the fire from the cutouts on the primary. He had the big smile on his face, and he wasn't intimidated by anything.
He was cowering in the corner.
So at any rate, so we went back to the shipyard, and it turned to be just in time because everybody up there was asking, where's Eric? We need Eric. We're building this new super tug and we need Eric. And I showed up right at the time. They need an electrical engineer, and it turned out to be that their lease agreement with the port required that there be an electrical engineer because we're talking about, 1 megavolt amp substations and 12 kilovolt power lines and lots of salt water everywhere. And nobody wanted to get in between those two. Eric was the only one that would do that, and he was the only one that knew how to do it. And that's when I did the big experiments with the Steinmetz parametric stuff and blacked out the city of Richmond, which they remember to this day. And oddly enough, these things have been carefully edited out of any presentations I've given on that subject. It turned out to be the San Francisco Tesla Society has nothing to do with Tesla. It's a front for Livermore lamps. And they really just they tried to suppress everything that I produced, but the person I was working with at the time, Stefan, had figured out a way to fish lip George Gabori, and we managed to get copies of this stuff, fortunately, because actually it's one of the most viewed videos on YouTube right now.
Mhm.
I think it's called History and Theory of Electricity. And that's back in the days when I could really belt this stuff out. And boy, I did then.
Mhm.
And Stefan and I, we had spent months preparing that. That was the first, Aaron and I had done that stuff later. These presentations, you can't believe how much work they are to put together, to get all the images and what have you, and edit all that stuff. They're massive. They take like sometimes, this one took 3 months.
Yeah.
So basically the guy that owned the business that was operating at the shipyard, and my, how would you say, my tenure there, by higher ups, he decided, okay, I'll build you a lab, and we'll rent a truck and move everything to the shipyard. So we managed to save most of it. But the unfortunate thing is when I was at the shipyard, I had to spend most of my time being an electrical engineer, but the cosmic induction generator was set up there, and low power, for lower power setup, but all you had to do was turn the circuit breakers on. I developed a couple of rather remarkable audio amplifiers there now, which at some point I think Aaron and I will continue on as a money-making effort. There are no amplifiers like these anywhere in the world. And that all worked fine. And then as it always goes, everything went awry at the shipyard and we lost the whole thing.
Mhm.
So David and I decided we had saved up a considerable quantity of money. And the thing is okay, well, let's just go back to Bolinas and do what we can with the residue, where we built Camp David, which was also a very significant facility. And Commonweal and those forces had it destroyed by the SWAT team, and that was the end of all that. And then basically I just went to work as an industrial electrician and what have you in Los Angeles, and that's when I built the Landers facility, which took about 20 years. And at the point it was completed, it was taken away from me by a real estate scam, somewhat organized by the present occupants of the Integratron, and 20 years of work went down the drain that can never be duplicated. So right now, what I'm doing here in Tonopah is all fragmentary. What can I reassemble out of this past? At my age, with the amount of interest that's available in this stuff anymore, I don't have RCA to go to. I don't have LADWP. I don't have Pacific Gas and Electric. I don't have Bell Telephone. I'm no longer a big shot in San Francisco Bay. The world has turned to garbage, and what can I do?
Right. Yeah,
but at any rate, I seem to be doing enough.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I can keep financing this.
Right. No,
all these little bills add up, and right now we're attempting to expand and get our antenna on the internet, but that's another utility cost.
Right.
Where's that going to come from? So many. I need 2 more phone lines to carry seismograph signals. We need this dedicated internet connection. I mean, we got $50 bill a month there, $100 bill a month here. We're getting a new power company service. That's going to be, another amount of money every month. I mean, I don't know. But, the thing is when I met Josh Reynolds, who basically financed me at between the Integratron to Santa Barbara phase.
Right.
He had been funding all of these, Tom Bearden, Andrea Puharich, Soviet scalar conspiracy, and all that absolute crap. And then when he saw the video of what was done at the Integratron, of the light bulb thing and all that, he had realized that he had basically exhausted millions of dollars of resources on people that were just feeding him a line of bull. So he invited them all to have dinner with me. And that's the last thing I wanted. To have dinner with me and him, and I'll never forget this. And the story's called The Last Supper. And the voodoo of all of these people, because I was the biggest threat to them. Bedini was another one, Bearden, Puharic. I was a major threat to all these people because they could feed, they could create these fantastic stories and theories and what have you, with the expectation that nobody would really know what is and what ain't. But that doesn't work with me. There's nobody that's got my experience.
Right.
And so here they all are, and here I am. And there's actually a depiction of it in an episode of The Outer Limits called Borderlands, oddly enough. And that's a coincidence where, there's the guy at the table and all the people sitting around and, and who's going to be, the glommers and the cheats and who's actually doing the work and what have you. And so Reynolds facilitated this dinner and was very cordial to everybody and what have you. And I'm just kind of sitting there, focusing on my dinner plate, just trying to isolate myself from all this, waiting in the bus station, so to speak. And with all the, urchins around you. I don't think too many people would know that experience unless they lived on the street. But at any rate, so the meal wraps up and Reynolds kicks back. He's, Southerner, he's got that kind of, quirky, but really mild-mannered, calm, slow, methodical attitude, accent, and all that. And he goes, yeah.
Can you describe who Josh Reynolds is? Because most people don't know who you're referring to.
Okay, Josh Reynolds was one of the biggest financiers in this speculative electrical, energy, all that kind of stuff.
In the 80s, in the 70s and 80s period, yeah.
But from the Reynolds Tobacco Company family.
He was one of the 5 siblings, I guess you could say, of the Reynolds Tobacco and Aluminum deal. His brothers and sisters, of course, all hated him for, not being like normal people and spending money on crazy stuff. He had this massive 5,000 acre piece of property with a 300-foot high, hydroelectric dam and the whole thing. And he was trying to encourage me to move there, which was very tempting, but I don't do well east of the Rockies, so it really wouldn't work out for me. But he had already spent millions of dollars on the Puharic and Bearden and all of that stuff, and these people had not produced anything that worked. So what he did is he started on the person sitting across from me. I was on his left-hand side, and the other person was on his right-hand side. And this guy, Reynolds goes, I've supported all this and that, and you haven't made anything that works. There's nothing. It's just all a bunch of talk, and then by person to person, including Pihart, he goes all the way around the table and rips everybody a new one. And I mean, and I'm kind of cringing and I don't know what's going on. But at any rate, finally he gets to me and points his finger at me. And I shrink in the chair because, I'm not Jesus. I have my own transgressions and connivances and screw ups and what have you. And okay, so what did I do? And he points at me and he goes, "No, this guy here has done more living on food stamps than you people have with my millions of dollars." And he dismissed all of them. And they received no more money from Josh Reynolds. So you think I might have a few enemies floating? So he turned around and looked at me and asked me, "How much money do you want?" Now, what am I going to say to somebody that runs through the bushes eating berries and leaves and finding food in natural, food store dumpsters? That's completely undomesticated. I don't know.
I mean, it's a question you had never even considered. Right. You didn't have a pat answer.
Jackasses, I forget all their names, all, like Buhart, all the Tesla experts, and they treated me like I was a shit-eating slug. And I couldn't get a dime out of them, not alone any support or anything. And then this guy, he goes, well, is $10,000 enough? Oh, yeah, that's enough. That's enough for, I can do something with that. And that's how I put a lot of this stuff together that we saw in the videos. And then eventually it got transferred to this guy in Mexico, and he supported basically inventory and paying the bills on that house, which was not cheap. I think it was $1,200 a month rent just for the house. And so that was rather remarkable. And he had attempted to donate money after that. But unfortunately, it was embezzled. And that was the problem with the financing from Mexico, which was difficult because there's a cultural thing and it's going, between two countries. And this guy, doesn't have time to be gibbering with Eric on the telephone. But I got a call from Josh Reynolds on our field telephone in Camp David in Bolinas, wondering why he hadn't heard from me and where I went. And, and what happened to the money that he'd sent. And this was the same thing with the industrialists in Mexico, is it was coming through an office, an administrative office in Texas. And those people had decided that we really didn't deserve that kind of money. And they started pinching and pinching and pinching and pinching. I don't know if you remember this or not, but, you were starting to say that, the money wasn't coming in to pay the bills and all that. And it was looking bad, and that's when David and I decided to pull the ripcord and try not to lose all of this. And and the shipyard facilitated the movement of it. And that just seems to be the way it works. It's just everybody else gets the money, but we never did.
Mm-hmm. So when Reynolds had contacted me in Bolinas, we were under full-blown legal, what do they call it? Law. It was very popular right now. What do they call it? Lawfare? Lawfare, yeah.
By Commonweal. And it was serious. They one way or another were going to destroy us. And Reynolds said he was going to put a stop to it. Then a month later, he was dead. And that was the end of all that. So all that work that David and I spent on building that facility, everything was lost and destroyed.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of pretty much covers the history of all of our interactions in this endeavor, from the good old days up to present, where there's really nobody left.
Yeah, so we didn't cover a lot of the things that Chris Carson contributed in those middle years.
Yeah, plus Chris Carson's personality too, and his abilities. Yeah, you want to get started on that?
Well, I mean, it's we've been at this for about an hour, I guess. So.
Well, let me say this. Okay, so when I met Chris Carson, he was also, one of these Southern type of characters. And, but the first thing that struck me is it didn't matter what subject I brought up, whether it was, changing the head gasket on the engine of my car, or talking about some radar I worked on in the Navy, or, some kind of public utility system, or radio transmitters, or electrical power transmission, distribution, nuclear, radiation effect. This guy knew everything.
Right, he knew about all that stuff.
Anything that I brought up, I don't care, from one end of the spectrum to the other, this guy had his fingers in. And then I found out he was involved with Bell Labs on a lot of the secret tests around Quadrillane.
Oh, okay.
You know,
I mean, his job in Santa Barbara was he was the head engineer for the physical plant at Santa Barbara Campus University. In other words, he kept the lights on at the university.
yeah, he was the facilities management department. He was the executive electrical engineer,
Yeah.
like I was at the shipyard. And if there was a substation that needed to be built, or you know, a whole building needed to be refitted with different
Right.
fixtures.
He was there. He was the one responsible to make it happen. Yeah. So yeah, so he was the only one of us, you know, that had a decent job.
Yeah, he was the only one that ran the regular route.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, and then you know, in his spare time, he was also one of the most astonishing model builders and you know, looking into all these things. One of the things I wanted to talk about was an experiment that he and I ran one morning. He had built a number of different types of electrostatic motors that ran on high voltage and that kind of thing. And one day we got together at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I brought over a Wimshurst generator to try and power up one of his motors. And we set it up. We set it up in the backyard, and the sun hadn't come up yet, and there had been, you know, a typical marine layer that morning, and there's a picture of Chris, yeah. So with a Wimshurst there, right? So but this the one I had was just a hand crank type, and we fired this thing up, and it did nothing. It didn't put out any high voltage. It wouldn't do anything, and we were just looking at each other like, I've never seen one of these things not, you know, work. And we were trying to figure it all out, and all of a sudden the sun comes over the mountain, shines down onto the machine, and as soon as the sunlight hit the Wimshurst machine, bam! It fired up to 50,000 volts, just like that. And we just looked at each other and said, "Oh shit." This is what Tesla was talking about, that the radiant energy, is riding on the radiant matter in the sunlight. This is what Reich said. This is what Tesla said. And we were blessed with this event that absolutely showed us, what is, how these things, what these things are actually gathering up out of the environment. It's amazing. Yeah.
Well, he was one hell of an experimenter.
Yeah.
That guy was absolutely brilliant. It's unfortunate that he died at a relatively early age, but yeah, and that kind of screwed me up when he died, because he was one of my main facilitators. When it came time to fix the car, or I needed a landing zone,
right?
Always had his place, and his laboratory, even though it was kind of a mess, but nevertheless,
he had too many projects going.
Yeah, but nevertheless, there was always something to do there.
Yeah.
And he was buying the food and gas. And of course, I learned early on, to live up on the ridge in my car to get away from all the noise and stuff. So I never stayed there really,
right.
But I was there all day. When I come down off the mountain, I'd be there all day. Then, then I would go over to his office in the university, and what he had done is he had regularly checked out all the old Steinmetz books, and that kind of stuff, so the university wouldn't pull them off the shelf. So he kept the library basically intact there. So basically, because he was an executive there, I had my own private parking place, and I could, whatever I wanted to do there, I could. And between the two of us, you know, and access to that information and discussing this stuff for hours, it was a very productive relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I had instigated this electrostatic parametric thing, which now Aaron has, and we, you know, demonstrated and analyzed that. And
That was the one that was built by Chris. And
Yeah.
when after he died, you know, his wife was giving stuff away, and when she contacted me and said, "Is there anything that Chris had that you know you want?" The only thing I asked for was that machine. I knew that machine was the most important thing I could get my hands on.
That was the prime thing.
You know, and I saved it until we could get it back to you.
Now, you ended up with a couple other things too, if I remember right. There was like a caduceus coil on a pipe that stands about maybe 2 feet.
You got a picture of that, Aaron?
No.
No, that's the
No, just a rotary converter.
that's the parametric you know,
No, you probably, I don't know if you still have it or not. And also Van Tassel also had a little phenolic board, and there was like 6 ferrite core, like little radio inductors. Each one had a little tag on it. You still have that?
No.
Yeah, because Chris had those. And it turns out to be now that board with those little inductors, from what, you know, I know now, I think actually popped out of one of these, you know, discussions like we're doing right now when I was trying to explain to the public. Those are basically mutual rather than self-inductors. I finally realized what Van Tassel was doing, and boy, I'd sure like to have put my fingers on those now. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, when Chris died, everybody died. Walt died and Lockwood died, and I was really left holding the bag. And when Walt died, you know, here I am on this piece of property, and what am I going to do with this big installation? And
Right.
how am I going to pay for this and what have you? And I couldn't get to, I had a lot of equipment there in Santa Barbara, and I couldn't get to any of it.
Right.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that all that just, you know, ended up, it wasn't properly, what would you say, you know, like,
I mean, the tragedy was when the funding cut off from Mexico and stuff, you know, you know, that all dried up. I didn't have enough money to help you either, and I always felt bad about that. But I mean, like, you know, we were all just, you know, surviving in our own way and helping each other, you know, as we could, and so I mean, that's just, yeah, things just fell apart.
well, I mean, it's unfortunate how that's happened so many times.
Yeah.
You know, that here's all the stuff, and here's, you know, like what I go through, like what happened with RCA, a number of big surplus caches which have been lost over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, the possibilities of bombing old AT&T sites and what have you is, where do you get the money and where do you put the stuff?
Right.
And it's just all going away.
Yeah.
You know, and like the old Bell telephone slogan, you know, before they were finally extinguished, was "It works." Can we say that about any of this stuff now?
Yeah.
If you buy anything, it's 50% chance it's defective.
Right. Yeah, right out of the box.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I just got done watching a YouTube video by a guy that I'm always on top of. It's called Mr. Carlson's Lab. And he's always got some piece of equipment that he's fooling with, and he's real smart on that stuff. And he got some China junk thing, some little LED yard light, and it just right off didn't work. So he figured, let's do a little video and see what's going on with this thing. So, you know, I bought incandescent light bulbs from the hardware store, and they last, in 2 days, they burn out.
Right.
You know, I bought a propane torch and it never worked.
Right.
You know, I buy a pair of fuses and they won't fit in the sockets in the fuse box. So right now, all that stuff that vanished to the winds is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
And I have, I basically, this place here could be standard surplus. I've got thanks to Steve Hills, there's a massive quantity of this stuff here, but there's no money to build the shelves and the benches. And so what can I, it's frustrating, I probably got one of the biggest glom caches of this stuff. I mean, everybody's always, stunned how we can just walk in there and whatever we need seems to fall off the shelf and on the floor. And that's just on the surface. But where can I get the money to properly secure this stuff?
Yeah.
It's like
when we were building out the lab in Santa Barbara, the first thing we did was we put shelves all over the wall on that one side and inventoried all this stuff. I mean, you could just walk up and grab anything you wanted. That's why one of those, that period was so creative, is that you could just build stuff.
Yeah, and that's the way it was at Landers too.
Exactly. Yeah.
At 20 years, people always criticize me. Oh, well, why are you fooling around with this? Or why are you fooling around with that? Let's just do this. Let's just do it. Oh, it's cheaper that way. Well, not later. So over that long period in Landers, basically 30 years, I spent 30 years there when Walt came to the Integratron, and we immediately became bosom buddies. So there are very few people in the world that are cooperatives in my life. So I tell people, when you're friends with Eric Dollard, it is a cooperative effort. It's not a social thing. It's cooperative. Like David and I worked together for like 30 years. There wasn't anything that Eric and David together could not do,
right,
or set up or make happen.
Right.
I mean, we were the ultimate team. And that's all we did. And it didn't matter that we were feral humans or what have you. That's how we survived. It didn't matter. We could always go to RCA and get the stuff we needed, and what have you. Lockwood was the same way. Don Lockwood, we lived together for, long time at the Integratron. He basically, was there at Santa Barbara, making sure, that the food was prepared and going to the store, all that kind of stuff. And Lockwood and I were together for like about 20 years. And the only person that can even approximate that now is Justin, because Justin and I literally have lived together in the pouring rain, in the mud, rat-infested hut in the redwoods, sharing our last can of beans. And what we've done out here cooperatively, I mean, there's nothing like it. I think Aaron pointed that out. Who is doing any Tesla stuff to this degree? Nobody.
No. They don't even know how.
No. Yet, Justin is having to forego wages, and I'm having to, grab money out of my Social Security, which basically just covers food and gas, to keep this operation going. Thank God there are significant contributors. So this project, this time around, it looked like, well, man, there's just no money to really do anything. And then thank God somebody donated $10,000. And then before that, there was, I was starting to, we've got this, pay these bills every month, and somebody, even though it's relatively insignificant compared to the magnitude of operations, somebody sent like $280 or something, but that paid all the bills for that month. But I never know when it's all going to come to stop, and I've got to drive off into the sunset.
Right.
And it's harder this day and age for people. I mean, I can't live like I used to.
Right.
That place is all overrun. Who would want to go back to San Francisco? It doesn't matter where you would go within a 50-mile radius in the deepest woods. It's all going to be a bad experience.
Yeah.
And everybody else bailed out like in the 70s. I stuck it out to the very end. I was the hardest thing for Commonweal ever to get rid of. They never run. In fact, they'll have my brand on their forehead as long as they live. They can never wash it off. But nevertheless, they win in the end. And that's the loss of the Integratron is a massive disaster.
Mhm.
Massive. But the loss of RCA and what those people did to it is literally a crime against humanity. There's three from Marconi up to me. And RCA's intent was for me to inherit the entire facility. And then came Commonweal. All gone.
Yeah.
Something totally unique in the history of mankind with its potential in an environment that defies description. All gone. Because as they say, this place is too nice for you.
Yeah, yeah. So, just for the listener, what Eric's referring to now is covered in the book, Wireless Giant of the Pacific book, and that facility there in Bolinas. So,
yeah, I had managed to stir enough trouble in Washington that it's like the director of the National Park Service had decided that the people that had in their department that had facilitated this disaster were immediately transferred. And what was left of the station, which at that point was under the ownership of MCI, they immediately re-engaged me. And so what was left of the place, it was made available to me again, but Commonweal made sure to screw all that up. And the National Park Service is not your friend. They're an extremely destructive organization.
yeah,
Extremely destructive. When they get a hold of something, it is dead. It's like, the difference between, seeing an octopus in the aquarium, pulsate and move and look at you and all that. Park Service can't tolerate that. The octopus has to be in a jar of formaldehyde. Then they move all their people in, everybody else is pushed out, and between the NPS and Commonweal, probably one of the greatest technological and spiritual and everything resource on the planet of the Earth. According to the old timers, I was told this was one of the 5 special places on the planet. Even the Indians called it the hole in the sky. And they wouldn't stay there for more than like 12 hours because they got over irradiated and went crazy. Just to be turned into a playland for the oligarch's offspring.
Yep.
It's absolutely revolting. And there's no turning it around.
yeah. No, it's gone.
Even if it was turned around, the whole place there now is just completely overrun. That's finally the reason why I left. You can't go anywhere. You can't enjoy yourself anymore.
Right.
There's all these freakos running around everywhere harassing you. All the dirt roads are all closed. Can't go anywhere anymore. What's the point?
Well, the whole state of California is in dire.
Yeah, I mean, there's things that I could, like with what Griffin's doing. Normally, I would just go back to my natural outdoor life in Los Angeles. That way I could be there working with him. And just drive up into the mountains at night. But Osama Obama decided to close the national forest, and Eric Dullard had no place to live. Right when I started my job with Caltech. Then all of a sudden, here I go, I'm fully engaged. Now I got no place to live. So even if I wanted to go back there, there's nothing to go back to.
Yep.
It's tragic.
Well, it's what they call progress.
Yeah.
So, hey, we're getting up on 90 minutes now. Do you want to?
This is a good time to cut,
Yeah.
This is a good first.
Yeah, we kind of closed it, with the final, tragic end in D minor.
Yeah. And you know, besides just stories, but going into some technical stuff, I think it'd be interesting to, I can put up that free energy research video page, kind of skim forward, you know, to each of the experiments, and maybe if you could both comment on that,
Yeah, that'd be good.
you know,
Yeah,
something like
that'd
that.
be
And
very
there's a
useful.
few other items.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, I guess we can wrap this up, and then we'll just continue on the next one. Maybe mid to late next week or something ballpark if you wanna.
Yeah, let's just space them out a week.
We'll see whatever
Is there any way that you can
your schedules look like, and then
that you can solicit questions or, you know, comments that we can talk about?
okay. I mean, unless we want to do that, maybe like at the very end, you know, just do videos like this where it's mostly both of you kind of going into different topics, and then
Yeah,
maybe do a final one where we have live callers call in who have already
Okay.
seen the videos and then can ask questions and stuff.
well, I'm noticing with the Zoom call videos, there's a lot of questions that are important to answer, and I'm just trying to figure out how to go about that. Because I've been unsuccessful in retransmission on this computer, and kind of the mandate here, because of the way that, you know, I feel about all this technology, that what I'm doing right now is kind of out of the ordinary, that basically this computer is supposed to only be a television, you know, not transmitting or engaging, and because that brings in, you know, the Trojan horse element and all that kind of stuff. So, and it just basically digital doesn't work for me. So I don't know how, the last Zoom call, there was a couple of really important questions, but I have to have but like, you know, I used to do in the energetic forum days, is where I mailed it, you know, I mail it off, and then somebody, who was that? David Webster, then he would transcribe the questions and stuff, but I would like to get a little more, so figure out a way to get kind of some more level of interaction.
Yeah. Well, maybe when this video goes out in the newsletter, I can ask people to submit questions. I got to think of an easy way where it's all compiled in one place.
Yeah,
Like I can put this video into a blog on emediapress.com, and if somebody wants to ask a question, they have to be logged in, and they can post a reply down at the bottom of the blog. That way it's all, you know, kind of compiled in one place. That way I don't have to copy and paste emails and all that, because I don't have time for that. But that might be the easiest way. I'll ask people to just leave a reply at the bottom of the blog post, which has this video, and then we can just go into those on the, you know, next video and so forth.
yeah.
That'll work.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'll get this uploaded to YouTube as soon as I can, and then Peter, I'll just talk to you about the schedule through email or something like that. Let me know a couple options, what works for you, and I'll coordinate with Eric.
In general, Wednesdays and Fridays don't work. This time it did. Friday did work, but Thursdays are usually open for me. So yeah, you know, if as we move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Very
Okay.
good.
Talk to y'all soon.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right.
Take care. See ya.
There.
Yeah, see you all later.
All right. Take care, Eric.
You too.